Tyra Banks is the Marquis de Sade, and let me tell you why. The recap of Tyra Banks is going to be pretty quick here, but she was one of the major supermodels of the 1990s, and recently she's been under fire because a documentary came out about her a couple years ago that was about her actions and the actions of her crew and fellow cast to contestants on America's Next Top Model, which is arguably her most famous contribution to pop culture. It will also be the main piece that I use to confirm her status as fashion's Marquis de Sade. The Marquis de Sade was an 18th century nobleman whose time on this earth coincided with the French Revolution. However, he's most well known as being the man who the term sadism was coined for. Sadism, Sade, you get it? Sade's most famous contribution, his America's Next Top Model, was an unfinished manuscript called 120 Days of Sodom. That was about 4 libertines who, out in a castle in the middle of nowhere, take a large group of people with varying appearances and plan to do 4 months of debauchery in different combinations and scenarios of an NSFW nature. The scenarios include giant contraptions, and nothing of these NSFW scenarios seem to be hot or spicy, really. There's almost a coldness to this text that originated the word sadism. All of these debaucherous actions are described in excruciating details with what parts of the manuscript were completed. By the way, the manuscript was lost for a century and found in the walls of where the Marquis de Sade was imprisoned for his sodomy charges. We thought we had lost it, and then it reappeared. Every once in a while it shows up on the market and is auctioned off. I think the last one was $7 million. But firstly, it's important to place the Marquis de Sade in a historical context. The French Revolution saw a time where the noblemen who had held tradition, power, and status in France and Europe at large were toppled over and replaced by their aristocratic lower caste, who then saw themselves as the new establishers of a new order. All of this turmoil also coincided with the scientific revolution, which also sought to categorize and place into intricate detail the specificities of natural occurrences, which were once believed to be incomprehensible creations of an omnipresent God. So it's hilarious to consider how the Marquis de Sade translates the cold calculation of the differences between plants into these cold calculations of the human body and all of its various NSFW scenarios in the 120 Days of Sodom. It's a funny commentary, but also it's important to look at the 120 Days of Sodom as the Marquis de Sade creating his own pleasure palace for himself. He cannot express himself freely in this tight, libertine, aristocratic world, but he can always retreat to the theater of the mind. This is when we loop back around to Tyra Banks, America's Next Top Model, and the function of reality TV in general, which, especially in its early incarnations in the 2000s, almost served as a literalization, a manifestation of Sade's pleasure theater of the mind. The innate voyeuristic cruelty of reality television has been dampered down over the decades, but in some of its earliest incarnations in the 2000s, you can tell just how cruel, how voyeuristic the reality shows were. A couple years ago, a long-forgotten reality show called The Swan was repopularized and made fun of by different commentary YouTubers. It was about a group of women who were told that they were ugly ducklings and that they were going to be whisked away to Hollywood, where in a month they would go through several complicated operations which typically take several months to recover. And by the end of that month, they were going to be done with get these surgeries, and they were going to be judged in a massive pageant to decide which of these plastic surgery women was going to be deemed the swan out of the leftover ugly ducklings. Although I guess in this scenario they are now less ugly ducklings. What I'm getting at by describing all of this is kind of setting up how reality TV is not always this innocent kumbaya. I don't think anybody has ever really believed that. I mean, even more wholesome reality TV in the 2000s had its cringe, voyeuristic moments. Take any of the talent competition shows. America's Got Talent, American Idol. What was the best part of that show? The first dozen episodes where you would watch them go across the country, and yeah, it was great to see people show their talent, but the best ones are when these people who don't know they can't sing show up and humiliate themselves for your entertainment. This is where we finally loop around to Tyra Banks and America's Next Top Model, another early incarnation of reality TV, and it reflects it in its cruelty. There's a bizarre, cold yet calculating, almost emotional lesbianism to the entire series. All of the women who are competing to be America's Next Top Model have to constantly prove how much they love Tyra. Tyra shows up as an omnipresent being, the god of this realm, and you will show how much you worship her. At one point, she even fakes her own death. She performs self-sacrifice and then has the women perform a kind of concerned death ritual for her to show how much they love her before revealing that she's absolutely fine. Once again, that cold, calculating sadism. And let's not forget the bizarre runways that would, put the women into contraptions that no fashion designer would ever put together for a fashion show. I'm reminded of the giant Pit in the Pendulums, straight out of Edgar Allan Poe, where they would swing across the stage as the women had to continuously walk in a straightforward strut, not ceasing, all while trying to avoid not getting hit by these pendulums that would knock them into the ground. There's also the added coldness of the persona of the model itself. We all know models aren't supposed to show faces because they are meant to draw to the clothes, not to the personality. So you'll have these bizarre scenarios where they're walking in giant inflatable bubbles in 6-inch heels over water, but they still have to keep that cold, robotic composure in these increasingly cartoonish scenarios. These are situations that Daffy Duck should be combating, not a 6'1" model in 6-inch heels. All of this culminates into Tyra Banks' own Sadean pleasure palace, where she is the goddess ruling over these women and whether they will make it to the top, to the end. Her own decisions matter above all, and she will not be questioned. She has overtaken the position of God as her own brand of libertine. It's also interesting to note that couture fashion itself originated in the same 18th century palaces where Marie Antoinette had her dresses specifically tailored to her. The same era that gave us the Marquis de Sade, gave us the seeds of the industry that would one day birth Tyra Banks, a Madame de Sade in her own right.